Ethan Cole sat in the small, cramped quarters of the spacecraft, staring out at the endless blackness beyond the window. His reflection stared back at him faintly, a mix of frustration and resignation etched across his face. He had been assigned to this mission as punishment, though he still didn't think he deserved it. The argument with his supervisor over an experimental project hadn't gone well. Ethan had been confident in his calculations, but when things went wrong during testing, the blame landed squarely on his shoulders. Now, instead of working on cutting-edge research at NASA headquarters, he was stuck on a routine data collection mission, light years away from anything important. The spacecraft wasn't much to look at, just a modest probe designed for short trips into deep space. Its walls were lined with panels of dull gray metal, and the hum of its engines created a constant background noise that made everything feel even smaller than it already was. Ethan sighed and leaned back in his chair. At least he wasn't alone. Two others had been sent along with him: Claire Bennett, the engineer who seemed more comfortable fixing machines than talking to people, and Ryan Mitchell, a young pilot fresh out of training who still carried the wide-eyed excitement of someone new to space travel. Claire was seated at the main console now, her fingers moving quickly over the controls as she ran diagnostics on the ship's systems. She rarely spoke unless necessary, preferring to focus on her work. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her expression remained neutral as she scanned the readouts. Ethan admired her efficiency, but her silence sometimes grated on him. He wanted to talk, to vent about how unfair this whole situation was. But Claire wasn't the type to listen. Ryan, on the other hand, was eager to fill the silence. "So," he said, glancing over his shoulder from the pilot's seat, "how long do you think this is going to take?" "Collecting data from asteroids doesn't sound too exciting." Ethan shrugged. "It's not supposed to be exciting. That's why they call it a punishment assignment." "Still, I don't see why we're bothering," Ryan continued, undeterred by Ethan's lack of enthusiasm. "We've mapped these asteroid belts before. What's so special about this one?" "It's not special," Ethan replied flatly. "That's the point. They just needed someone to check it off the list." Claire finally turned around, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at both of them. "If you two are done complaining, maybe we could focus on actually getting there. Or would you rather float aimlessly until we run out of fuel?" Her tone was dry, but there was a hint of irritation underneath. Ethan raised his hands defensively. Fine. Just trying to pass the time." Ryan grinned sheepishly. "Sorry, Claire, I'll try to keep my questions to myself." The rest of the journey passed mostly in silence, broken only by the occasional update from Ryan or the soft beeping of instruments. Eventually, they reached their destination, a cluster of asteroids drifting lazily through the emptiness of space. From a distance, they looked like nothing more than chunks of rock, jagged and lifeless. But as they drew closer, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something about them seemed off. Maybe it was the way the sunlight caught certain edges, making them gleam faintly despite their dull surfaces. Or maybe it was just his imagination playing tricks on him after days of boredom. "All right," Claire said, breaking the quiet. "Let's find a spot to land and start gathering data. There's no sense wasting time." Ryan guided the ship, carefully toward one of the larger asteroids, setting it down gently on a relatively flat surface. Once they were secure, the three of them suited up and stepped outside. The airlock hissed open, and they emerged onto the barren landscape, their boots crunching against the dusty ground. It was eerily quiet, save for the sound of their breathing inside their helmets. Ethan adjusted the scanner in his hand and began sweeping it over the area. Most of the readings were exactly what he expected: ordinary rocks, traces of iron and nickel, nothing unusual. But then something caught his attention. A faint signal, barely noticeable, coming from deeper within the asteroid. He frowned and moved closer, adjusting the settings on the device to get a clearer reading. "What is it?" Claire asked, noticing his hesitation. "I'm picking up some kind of energy signature," Ethan replied. "It's weak, but it's definitely there." Ryan joined them, peering over Ethan's shoulder at the scanner. "Energy? Out here? Are you sure it's not just interference? I'm sure, Ethan said firmly. This is different. It's almost rhythmic. Claire crossed her arms, her skepticism evident. Rhythmic energy on an asteroid? That sounds unlikely. Then explain this. Ethan pointed to the screen, where the signal pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. I've never seen anything like it before. Reluctantly, Claire agreed to investigate further. Together, they followed the signal, climbing over jagged rocks and navigating narrow crevices until they reached its source. Buried beneath layers of dust and debris was a strange object, smooth and metallic, unlike anything natural. Its surface shimmered with intricate patterns that shifted and changed as if alive. This can't be real, Ryan whispered, his voice tinged with awe. Claire knelt beside it, examining it closely. Whatever it is, it's not from Earth. Ethan felt a thrill of excitement mixed with unease. This was far beyond anything he'd anticipated finding on this mission. For the first time since leaving Earth, he felt truly alive. Whatever this object was, it was going to change everything, for better or worse. The three of them stood in silence, staring at the strange object buried in the asteroid. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, its surface shimmering faintly as if it were alive. Claire reached out cautiously, her gloved hand hovering just above the metallic surface. She hesitated for a moment before touching it lightly. The pattern shifted under her fingertips, swirling and rearranging themselves in ways that seemed almost deliberate. What did you do? Ryan asked, his voice tense. I didn't do anything, Claire replied sharply, pulling her hand back. It reacted on its own. Ethan stepped closer, his scanner still active in his hand. This thing is putting out some kind of energy, field. It's not natural. It's artificial. Ryan glanced around nervously. Do you think it's dangerous? Dangerous or not, we can't just leave it here, Ethan said firmly. We need to take it back to the ship and figure out what it is. Claire nodded reluctantly. Fine, but let's be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with. Working together, they managed to lift the object, surprisingly light despite its size, and carry it back to the spacecraft. Once inside, they placed it on the central table in the lab area and began examining it more closely. Claire ran tests on its composition, while Ethan focused on analyzing the energy signature it emitted. Ryan hovered nearby, watching intently but unsure how to help. After several hours of work, they still hadn't uncovered much. The object defied every known classification. Its material wasn't metal, at least not any metal found on Earth. And its energy output fluctuated unpredictably. Just as frustration began to set in, something changed. The object suddenly emitted a soft glow, filling the room with a warm, golden light. What's happening? Ryan asked, stepping back instinctively. I don't know, Ethan admitted, shielding his eyes against the brightness. But I think it's trying to communicate. The light pulsed rhythmically, growing brighter and dimmer in steady intervals. Then, without warning, it projected a series of images into the air above the table. At first, the images were chaotic, flashes of shapes and colors that made no sense. But gradually, they began to form recognizable patterns. Numbers appeared, followed by geometric symbols and complex equations. It's sending us a message, Claire said, her voice tinged with awe. Look at those sequences. They're mathematical. Ethan leaned forward, studying the projections, carefully. These aren't random, they're structured. Someone or something is trying to talk to us. Ryan stared wide-eyed at the floating symbols. But why? And who's doing this? We won't know until we figure out what it means, Ethan replied, already scribbling notes onto a tablet. He turned to Claire. Can you record all of this? Every detail might be important. Claire nodded and adjusted the equipment to capture the projections. As she worked, the object continued to transmit more information, each new sequence building on the last. Some parts of the message were straightforward, using universal constants like pi and the speed of light to establish common ground. Other sections were harder to interpret, relying on abstract concepts that required creative thinking. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly to decode the message. Ethan focused on the mathematical elements, piecing together relationships between the numbers and symbols. Claire handled the technical side, ensuring their instruments accurately captured every aspect of the transmission. Ryan, though less experienced, contributed by organizing their findings and double-checking calculations. As dawn approached aboard the spacecraft, they finally made a breakthrough. The message wasn't just a collection of data, it was an invitation. Embedded within the sequences were coordinates pointing to a location far beyond their current position, deep in uncharted space. Alongside the coordinates were visual representations of planets, stars, and other celestial bodies, suggesting a destination rather than a threat. "This has to be real," Ethan said, his voice trembling with excitement. "They're inviting us to meet them." Claire frowned, her practical nature kicking in. "Or it could be a trap. We don't know who or what sent this. Either way, we have to respond," Ethan insisted. "If there's even a chance this is genuine contact with intelligent life, we can't ignore it." Ryan nodded slowly. "He's right. This is bigger than us. Bigger than Earth, even." Together, they decided to send a reply. Using the same mathematical language embedded in the original message, they crafted a simple response: acknowledgement of receipt and a request for clarification. They transmitted the signal through the ship's communication array, aiming it toward the coordinates provided. Then, they waited. Days passed with no response. Doubt crept into their minds, and tensions rose once again. Had they misinterpreted the message? Was the object simply a relic abandoned long ago by whatever civilization created it? Just when they began to lose hope, the object reacted again. This time, the light was brighter and the projections clearer. New sequences appeared accompanied by additional visuals. These weren't just instructions, they were adaptations. The alien intelligence behind the message was learning from their response, refining its method of communication to match human understanding. Words began to form alongside the symbols, primitive at first but gradually becoming coherent. "They're teaching themselves our language," Claire murmured, her skepticism giving way to wonder. Ethan couldn't contain his excitement. "They're trying to bridge the gap between us." The final part of the message confirmed their suspicions. It was indeed an invitation, an opportunity to make first contact with an advanced civilization. The coordinates led to a distant point outside the solar system, far beyond anything humanity had explored before. Though the journey would be risky, none of them doubted the significance of what they had discovered. "We can't keep this to ourselves," Ethan said, breaking the silence that followed. "This changes everything." Claire nodded slowly. "You're right. But convincing Earth won't be easy. People won't believe us unless we have proof." Ryan grinned. "Then, let's give them proof. Let's go." For the first time since the mission began, the three of them shared a sense of purpose. What started as a punishment assignment had transformed into something extraordinary. They knew the road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was clear: humanity was no longer alone in the universe. The decision to follow the coordinates was not made lightly. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan spent hours debating the risks and rewards of such a journey. The destination was far beyond anything humanity had ever attempted to reach, deep in uncharted space where no Earth vessel had gone before. The fuel reserves on the Pioneer horizon were limited, and there was no guarantee they could make it back safely. Yet none of them could ignore the enormity of what they had discovered. This was humanity's first real chance to meet an alien civilization, and turning away felt like abandoning their duty. "We have enough fuel to get there," Claire said finally, breaking the tense silence. "But we'll need to ration everything: power, food, water. If something goes wrong, we won't have much room for error." Ryan nodded. "I can plot the course. It'll take weeks, maybe months, but I think I can do it." Ethan looked at both of them, his expression serious. "This isn't just about us anymore. If we pull this off, we'll be changing history. Humanity will never be the same." Claire didn't argue. For all her practicality, even she couldn't deny the significance of their discovery. She turned back to her console and began adjusting the ship's systems, preparing it for the long journey ahead. Ryan focused on programming the navigation system, double-checking every calculation to ensure accuracy. Ethan, meanwhile, continued, studying the alien message, searching for any clues that might help them understand what they were heading toward. As the ship left the asteroid belt behind, the trio settled into a routine. Days stretched into weeks, each one bringing them closer to the mysterious coordinates. The journey wasn't easy. Space travel was isolating under the best circumstances, and the vast emptiness around them only heightened the feeling of being completely alone. But the three of them found ways to cope. They took turns sharing stories from their lives back on Earth, revealing pieces of themselves they had kept hidden before. Claire talked about growing up in a small town where everyone expected her to follow in her father's footsteps as a mechanic. Ryan spoke of his childhood fascination with space, how he used to lie on the roof of his house staring at the stars for hours. Ethan shared his struggles with self-doubt, admitting that he often wondered if he was smart enough to live up to his own ambitions. These conversations brought them closer together, easing some of the tension that had lingered since the start of the mission. They began working as a team, supporting each other through the challenges of the journey. When the ship's oxygen filtration system malfunctioned, Claire stayed up for nearly 2 days straight to repair it, refusing to rest until she was sure it was fixed. When Ryan grew anxious about the endless blackness outside the windows, Ethan reminded him to focus on the mission, encouraging him to see the beauty in the unknown. And when Ethan doubted whether they were doing the right thing, Ryan and Claire reassured him that they had no choice but to keep going. Finally, after weeks of travel, they reached the coordinates. What they found there defied explanation. Floating in the void was a massive structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was shaped like a ring, impossibly large and perfectly symmetrical, its surface gleaming with a metallic sheen. The object seemed to hum faintly, emitting a low-frequency vibration that resonated through the ship. "That's incredible," Ryan whispered, his voice filled with awe. Claire studied the readings on her console. "It's generating some kind of energy field. I've never seen anything like it." Ethan stared at the structure, his mind racing. "This has to be it. This is where the message came from." They approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. As they drew closer, smaller vessels began emerging from the ring, surrounding the Pioneer Horizon. These ships were sleek and streamlined, their designs utterly alien yet undeniably advanced. At first, Ethan feared they might be hostile, but the ships made no move to attack. Instead, they projected a series of holographic images directly into the crew's minds, bypassing language barriers entirely. The experience was overwhelming. Streams of information flooded their thoughts, too fast to process fully. Images of distant worlds, strange creatures, and intricate technologies flashed before their eyes. Alongside these visuals came emotions, curiosity, caution, and a sense of purpose. It was as if the beings behind the projections were introducing themselves, showing glimpses of their history and culture. "They're trying to communicate," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "We're actually talking to them." Claire closed her eyes, focusing on the flow of information. "They're ancient, older than anything we've imagined." Ryan gripped the edge of his seat, struggling to keep up with the deluge of data. "They're saying they've been watching us." Ethan nodded, piecing together fragments of meaning from the chaotic stream. "For centuries, they've been waiting for us to grow, to show signs of maturity." The message became clearer as the aliens adapted their communication to match human understanding. They called themselves the Zitherans, a civilization that had existed long before humanity first walked upright. Their technology was beyond comprehension, capable of manipulating matter and energy in ways that seemed magical. Yet despite their power, they were not conquerors. They sought allies, partners in a coalition of species working together to protect one another from dangers lurking in the galaxy. "These dangers, they're serious," Ethan said, translating the warning embedded in the message. "There are threats out there, things we aren't ready to face. Claire frowned. What kind of threats? I don't know, Ethan admitted. But whatever they are, the Zitherans believe we'll need their help to survive. Ryan looked uneasy. So what happens now? Do we join them? It's not just about us, Ethan replied. This is a decision for all of humanity. We have to tell Earth what we've found. The Zitherans seemed to anticipate their hesitation. Through the projections, they offered a gift, a small device capable of instantaneous communication across vast distances. With it, Ethan, Claire, and Ryan could relay their discovery to Earth and await instructions. The device was placed aboard the Pioneer Horizon by one of the smaller vessels, which then retreated back toward the ring. As the crew prepared to leave, the Zitherans sent one final message. It was simple but profound. Humanity had potential, but it would require wisdom and courage to fulfill it. The choice was theirs. The journey back to Earth was quieter than the trip out. Each of them was lost in thought, grappling with the weight of what they had experienced. They knew their return would spark controversy and disbelief, but they also knew the evidence was undeniable. Whatever happened next, humanity's place in the universe had changed forever. The journey back to Earth was long and filled with uncertainty. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan spent most of their time preparing for what lay ahead. They knew the world wouldn't believe them easily, no matter how solid their evidence was. The alien device they had been given, a small, smooth object that hummed faintly when touched, was their strongest proof, but even that might not be enough. Governments and scientists would demand explanations, tests, and verifications. The three of them braced themselves for skepticism, resistance, and perhaps even fear. As the Pioneer Horizon approached Earth's orbit, the trio reviewed every detail of their encounter with the Zitherans. They compiled logs, recorded observations, and synced all the data from the alien message and the mysterious ring-like structure. Claire worked tirelessly to ensure the ship's systems were functioning perfectly, knowing they couldn't afford any technical failures during re-entry. Ryan double-checked their trajectory, making sure they landed safely at the designated spaceport. Ethan focused on drafting a report, trying to put into words an experience that felt almost impossible to describe. When they finally touched down, the scene awaiting them was chaotic. News of their return had spread quickly, and cameras flashed as officials and reporters swarmed the landing site. Security personnel formed a tight perimeter around the spacecraft, ushering the crew away from the crowd. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan were taken to a secure facility where they were debriefed by a panel of NASA executives, government representatives, and top scientists. At first, the questions were skeptical. How do we know this isn't some elaborate hoax? One official asked, his tone sharp. You're telling us you made contact with an alien species? That's a bold claim. Ethan remained calm, presenting the evidence systematically. He showed them recordings of the alien projections, mathematical sequences, and the shimmering patterns from the object they had found. Claire demonstrated the capabilities of the communication device, explaining how it allowed instantaneous transmission over vast distances. Ryan recounted their journey in simple terms, emphasizing the emotions and sensations they had felt during the encounter. Despite their efforts, many in the room remained unconvinced. Some accused them of fabricating the story to gain fame or escape blame for their previous failures. Others dismissed the idea of aliens altogether, claiming humanity was alone in the universe. But then, something changed. Using the alien device, Ethan transmitted a live signal to the coordinates of the Zitharan ring. Within moments, a response came, an unmistakable pulse of energy that resonated through the room, accompanied by a brief projection of the same geometric symbols they had seen in deep space. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Doubt gave way to shock, then awe. The officials exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and wonder. One scientist leaned forward, his voice trembling slightly. This is real. We're actually communicating with them? Ethan nodded. They've been watching us for centuries. They want to help, but they also warned us about dangers we aren't ready to face. The room erupted into urgent discussions. Plans were made to analyze the alien technology further, to study its potential applications and implications. Military advisors raised concerns about security, while diplomats debated how to approach the Zitherans diplomatically. Amid the chaos, Ethan, Claire, and Ryan were sidelined, their role reduced to answering endless questions. It was frustrating, but they understood the gravity of the situation. This discovery wasn't just theirs. It belonged to all of humanity. Days turned into weeks as the world grappled with the news. Governments convened emergency meetings, scientists worked around the clock to decipher more of the Zitharan message, and media outlets flooded the airwaves with speculation. Public reaction was mixed. Some people celebrated the possibility of joining an interstellar coalition, seeing it as a chance for peace and progress. Others feared the unknown, worrying that contact with aliens might lead to conflict or exploitation. Protests broke out in cities across the globe, with crowds chanting slogans both for and against the idea of reaching out to the Zitherans. Through it all, Ethan, Claire, and Ryan stayed close, supporting each other as the weight of their discovery pressed down on them. They attended press conferences, gave interviews, and answered countless questions, always careful to emphasize the importance of unity and caution. "This isn't just about us," Ethan told a reporter during one interview. "It's about humanity as a whole. We have a choice, to grow together or to let fear divide us." Eventually, a decision was made. A team of experts, including Ethan, Claire, and Ryan, would use the alien device to establish formal contact with the Zitherans. Their mission was clear: learn as much as possible about the coalition and determine whether humanity was ready to join. If the answer was yes, they would pave the way for future cooperation. If not, they would need to find another path forward. The day of the transmission arrived, and the tension in the control room was palpable. Scientists, engineers, and government officials gathered around a large screen displaying the alien device. Ethan stood at the center, flanked by Claire and Ryan. Together, they initiated the connection, sending a carefully crafted message expressing gratitude for the Zitherans' willingness to communicate and asking for guidance on how to proceed. For several agonizing minutes, there was no response. Just as doubts began to creep in, the device lit up, projecting a series of images into the air. The Zitherans were speaking again, their message clearer than ever before. Through the projections, they explained the nature of the coalition: a network of civilizations working together to protect one another from threats both within and outside their borders. They offered humanity membership, but with conditions. Earth would need to demonstrate its ability to overcome division and act as a united species. In return, the Zitherans promised knowledge, resources, and protection. "They're giving us a chance," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "But it's up to us to take it." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Humanity stood at a crossroads, facing a decision that would shape its future forever. For Ethan, Claire, and Ryan, the journey was far from over. They had opened the door to the stars, but walking through it would require courage, wisdom, and trust, not just in the Zitherans, but in themselves. The decision to join the coalition wasn't made overnight. It took months of debate, negotiation, and careful planning. Governments around the world argued fiercely about the risks and rewards of aligning with an alien civilization. Some leaders feared losing control, worried that humanity's independence might be compromised. Others saw it as an opportunity to advance technology, medicine, and energy solutions far beyond what Earth could achieve alone. In the end, a global council was formed, a group of scientists, diplomats, and representatives from every nation to oversee humanity's response to the Zitherans. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan were at the center of it all. Their first-hand experience with the aliens made them invaluable advisors, though the pressure was immense. They attended endless meetings, answered countless questions, and worked tirelessly to ensure humanity approached the situation with clarity and caution. Despite their exhaustion, they felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just another mission. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. The Zitherans remained patient throughout the process, sending periodic updates via the alien device. Each transmission reinforced their message. Humanity had potential, but it would need to prove itself worthy of trust. The coalition wasn't a charity, it was a partnership built on mutual respect and shared responsibility. To demonstrate their seriousness, the Zitherans provided a series of challenges designed to test humanity's ability to work together. These weren't physical tests, but intellectual and ethical ones, requiring cooperation across borders and disciplines. One challenge involved solving a complex puzzle that simulated a planetary crisis. Nations had to pool resources, share knowledge, and coordinate efforts to find a solution. At first, progress was slow. Old rivalries and mistrust threatened to derail the effort, but gradually, breakthroughs began to happen. Scientists collaborated in ways they never had before, sharing data openly and building on each other's ideas. Politicians set aside differences, recognizing that failure wasn't an option. When the final solution was transmitted back to the Zitherans, the response was immediate: approval, along with a new challenge. As the months passed, humanity began to change. The process of working toward a common goal brought people closer together. Barriers between countries started to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of unity. Even ordinary citizens played a role, participating in initiatives aimed at addressing global issues like climate change, poverty, and inequality. For the first time in history, humanity felt like a single species rather than a collection of divided nations. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan watched these changes unfold with a mix of pride and relief. They knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would still be disagreements, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But the progress was undeniable. Humanity was learning to grow, not just technologically, but morally and socially. Finally, after nearly a year of preparation, the moment arrived. The Global Council announced that Earth was ready to formally accept the Zitherans' invitation. A delegation would travel to the ring-like structure, a place now known as the Gateway, to meet the aliens face to face. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan were chosen to lead the mission, accompanied by a team of experts representing diverse fields of science, diplomacy, and culture. The journey to the Gateway was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. As the spacecraft approached the massive structure, its shimmering surface seemed even more awe-inspiring than before. Smaller vessels emerged to guide them inside, leading them through a tunnel of light that defied explanation. When they emerged, on the other side, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with beings unlike anything they had ever imagined. The Zitherans were tall and slender, their bodies glowing faintly with an inner light. Their faces were smooth and featureless, yet somehow expressive, conveying emotions through subtle shifts in color and texture. They communicated telepathically, their thoughts flowing directly into the minds of the human delegation. Though the EIGD experience was overwhelming, there was no sense of hostility or judgment, only curiosity and hope. A Zitheran leader stepped forward, its presence commanding attention without words. "You have shown courage and determination," it said, its voice resonating in their minds. "Your actions prove that you are capable of growth. We welcome you to the coalition." The delegation exchanged glances, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weight of emotion. "Thank you for giving us this chance. We know we still have much to learn, but we're ready to work alongside you for the good of all." The Zitheran nodded, its form rippling gently. "Together, we will face the challenges ahead. You are no longer alone." Over the following days, the humans learned more about the coalition and its purpose. They discovered that the dangers the Zitherans had warned about were real. Powerful forces in the galaxy sought to exploit weaker species, spreading chaos and destruction wherever they went. The coalition existed to protect its members, using advanced technology and shared knowledge to maintain peace. Humanity's role would be small at first, limited to observation and support, but over time, it would grow into a full-fledged partner. When the delegation returned to Earth, they brought with them not just knowledge but also a renewed sense of hope. News of their success spread quickly, inspiring millions to continue working toward a better future. The alien device became a symbol of possibility, a reminder that humanity's potential was limitless if it chose to embrace cooperation over conflict. Ethan, Claire, and Ryan stood together on the deck of the Pioneer Horizon, watching the stars through the ship's windows. The journey had changed them in ways they couldn't have anticipated. What began as a punishment assignment had turned into humanity's greatest achievement, a bridge to the cosmos and a chance to become something greater. "We did it," Ryan said quietly, breaking the silence. Claire smiled, her usual seriousness softened by pride. "Yeah, we did." Ethan looked at both of them, then back at the stars. "This is just the beginning."